Hey everyone, welcome to another entry in my review play series. Today I'm taking a look at Danmaku Unlimited 3, a game I've spent a lot of time with over the past year and a half or so since it came out on Switch and a little bit before then. And I feel like at this point I may be sort of an authority on this game just because I've put a lot of time into it. I've put up some high scores in it. I've just been really invested in it and kind of know its in and outs probably more than a lot of other people. And so before we jump into the review, I want to just give some prefacing thoughts. My first is that I think this is an extremely well-made game, very well designed. I think it is underrated. Even though it's well known and people talk about it, I feel like among the hardcore players, I feel like it is underrated. It kind of has a reputation of being a little generic or a little derivative, I think. But I don't feel that way. Having played more bullet hells kind of like it, like SDOJ, the Toho games, the later Cave games, I still feel like Dan 3 has a really unique feel and identity that I haven't really experienced with any other shmup. So if you think that it is generic, maybe because the visuals are kind of generic looking and stuff like that, I would urge you to take a second look at it because I think it's a really well-made game. However, it isn't perfect, and so I just want to say that if the developer of this game ever sees this interview, or if the developer of the game ever sees this review, I just want to say that I'm a huge fan and that all my criticisms come from a place of appreciation, but I feel like there are some aspects of the game that could be improved. And I'm not talking about the core nitty-gritty, just more like features or user stuff, just, a little extra that would really put this game over and make it a top quality release, which I'll get to within the review. So before we begin, today you'll notice that I'm doing a review of both the PC version and the Nintendo Switch version. So some differences between them is that the Nintendo Switch version has a little more input lag. I've done more testing and stuff like that, and I found that playing it docked with the Brooks Ultimate Converter, it's the Brooks Ultimate Fighting Board is what it's called. It's a fighting board that you put in an arcade stick. It can connect to PS4, PS3, Xbox 360, Xbone, and the Switch. It connects to pretty much everything. It has really good response time, at least that I've found so far. But with that said, the Switch version, just because of the extra latency from the dock and from the VSync, it's probably sitting around 4 frames. And the PC version, when you disable VSync and use a good arcade stick, is sitting around 3 frames. So it's a little extra sluggish, and you can kind of feel it. You can feel that little extra bit, but it's not really bad. So the Switch version is solid, and more of its shortcomings is mostly due to the Switch itself rather than the game. So with the PC release, even though, PC generally is the best option, there are still some drawbacks with this PC release that I haven't encountered with any other shmups. And I don't know if they can be fixed or if they're just so ingrained in the game's coding that they're just here to stay. The major one is that the PC release of Dan 3 is a resource-eating machine. It will tear your computer in half. This game does not play around when it comes to how much resources it uses, which is funny because, it kind of has a reputation for being a smartphone game, so you think it's going to be like really low taxing, but no. I have a gaming PC, gaming laptop that's a little outdated, but I would say its capability is somewhere between a PS3 and a PS4. It can run Metal Gear Solid 5 really well, for instance. But it can barely run Dan 3. Just barely. I have to drop the resolution really low and just disable everything to get it to run somewhat smoothly. Another instance is that I have a much more powerful gaming PC desktop, and it can run it at a higher resolution, but it still can't max it out really well. And I can't, you'll see in the PC video here, this is me playing and capturing it, you know, with OBS. It can barely do that. I mean, it works, but I have to chop down the frame rate. And so you're wondering, why does the PC capture look so shitty? It's because this game just rips through your resources. It is very intensive on your computer. So it is possible that you may not be able to even run the PC release. Like I said, you'd kind of need a solid gaming computer to do that. And that's a problem because it's kind of an issue where on the PC release, you will get slowdown if your computer isn't fast enough, where you shouldn't. So technically, like, that's why I feel like scores done on the PC version should have video attached to them, because, like, for instance, let's say I bump up the resolution, all of a sudden I'm getting much slower and easier gameplay on my laptop, which I don't like that. So I play it on my gaming desktop, and I make sure it's a solid 60 FPS the whole time. So those are the drawbacks of each version. You'll see here that I have this switched version also. So in handheld mode, I've noticed very little slowdown and stuff like that. It's when you get to dock mode, because the Switch, you know how it is. So you'll see in this video here, which I use an external capture card obviously to get the video, that I've actually, because I have my Switch modded, I'm actually overclocking the Switch in dock mode. So it is putting out a better performance than probably you'd get on an unmodified Switch. Though I think with the firmware update they did, I think that might improve it. So unfortunately I can't tell you if that does or not, because my Switch is modded and I'm not updating the firmware to tell you that. So there you go. And also, just a fun fact, I have the limited run physical version of this game, which is pretty cool. Came with a little manual and everything. I don't know if you can still get it or not, but that's actually the version I'm playing, is the physical cartridge, which is pretty cool. So let's get into it, okay? So the Switch, before I hit play here, the Switch video footage is on normal mode, and the PC video footage is hard mode. And I actually went with the hard mode PC footage because this is my high score for hard mode overall. So yeah, it's a much better score, the PC mode. But this normal Switch run, I feel like I want to kind of make it front and center because I think it's interesting. I think it highlights some of the issues with the game a little better than my just hard mode stomping it. So definitely worthwhile watching both replays, going back and forth and comparing. They are different difficulties on different platforms. So let's begin. So you'll notice right away that I like the rain effects, and I like a lot of the effects this game has. I feel like over time, I remember in my original review I kind of criticized the graphics and felt like they were a little generic and boring, which is kind of true with the models, but over time they really have grown on me. I don't know, maybe he updated them a little bit since then also, that's possible. But I think over time the graphics do grow on you if you play the game a lot. So if you look at it first glance and you think it looks a little generic, just keep playing it and just stick with it, don't worry about it too much, and they will grow on you. They have for me, that's for sure. And I think the visual effects of the bullets and the grazing, like you can see the sparks coming off when you graze and stuff, I think those are really nice touches. Visually, I think this game is really well designed. It just isn't obvious how nuanced a lot of the visual design is until you get to know the game a little better. Though I always thought this first stage is, I think I mentioned this before, I always thought this first stage is kind of silly because you're like flying at this weird angle, like you're not flying over the city, you're flying parallel to it, like you're flying in between the buildings or something. Anyway, I've talked about that before. Let's get into the more nitty-gritty stuff here. So the gameplay of this game, the basics I went over in my last review, and it's your basic cave style stuff. SDOJ I think was a big influence. You know, you got your focus shot. Then you have the Toho slow, which is really nice. I'm really glad they added that because of the grazing. I feel like the grazing mechanic is really well done. It's really solid, really reliable. And a fun fact, I didn't know this until I did this run yesterday. The grazing hitbox or whatever, like the grazing range, is actually smaller on the easier difficulties. So on medium mode, you have to get closer to bullets than you do in hard mode. It makes sense, it's kind of a nice balancing act, so it doesn't make medium mode completely trivial when you're playing it for score, because you have to start getting closer. And sometimes certain chains and stuff are harder in medium mode just because there's less bullets and stuff. I feel like in hard mode, the danger is usually getting hit by something. Medium mode, dropping your chain just because of you speed killing too quickly or whatever is, even in the later stages, a possibility. So I think here's some fun examples of the first boss here. You can milk a little bit, and the funny thing about this game and its scoring is that it's really top heavy in that the last two stages make up 75% of your score about. And so I'll talk about this a little more as we continue, but that has some interesting side effects. But here you can see I'm milking these beams. Yeah, any beams are your friend because you can really milk them. And the good thing is I like how the grazing is really connected to your survival too, because the more you graze, the faster you build meter, and then you get a hyper, and the hyper really helps you with certain sections. And the game was designed that way, where if you're not hypering, it's possible to go through the game without hypering. I've done it. But it's just not really designed that way, so some sections are much harder because of it. Yeah, and you'll notice little homages to Ikaruga with the text in between stages. I thought that was cool. So stage 2, this stage is probably the easiest stage in the game. It's actually easier than stage 1 score-wise, just because stage 1 has a few points where you can drop your chain if you're not really on top of it. Stage 2, it's easy to survive and it's easy to chain. It's the easiest stage in the game other than the boss fight. The stage itself though is easier once you get used to it. So you'll notice the layout I'm using here, I use it in both runs, is I'm using wide shot and wide laser. This wide laser thing is OP because not only is it wide for dealing with enemy patterns and formations, it also tracks for dealing with bosses and stuff. It's just really good, and overall I feel like there are some hidden shot types and stuff, but other than the hidden ones, like the default ones, wide shot and this laser, I think it's AC is the configuration, is just the best. Yeah, and the fun thing is in Dan 3 you can pick different configurations and they change how your ship plays instead of having different ships. I really like that. The only issue is just that there isn't a wide enough player base to really warrant me playing all these different styles and scoring with all these different styles, because like I'd be the only one who's doing that. Yeah, the competition in this game is extremely low. I mentioned before I have the high score in a few of the categories, and I plan to get it in all of them by the end of it. Maybe this will inspire some more people to play the game. So I better hurry before, you know, Jamers or someone decides to start playing the game and whipping my scores. So, but I feel like I have put out some pretty solid scores I'm proud of. The hard mode one, you'll see in the PC version's a really interesting one to talk about as we continue. So the enemy patterns here, I think, are the boss patterns. I've played this game, like I said, overall I would say probably around 300-400 hours easily, if not more. And when you play a shmup that much, there always comes a point where there's just sections you think, okay, this section blows, this stage sucks, like, it happens. With the cave games, like, there's just a lot of stuff like that. Like, even in DDP, one of my favorite shmups, there's certain stages like stage 3 where I'm just like, The stage is either boring or annoying. It's not that fun to play. The crazy thing about Dan 3 is that it's never gets boring, and none of the stages are like have sections where I go, oh, this section or that section. It has definitely choke points and hard, how do you like that? And hard moments, but overall, I think it's really well designed. I think when it comes to the core gameplay, it's top-notch stuff. I think just as good as some cave games, to be honest. And maybe some people won't agree with me there, but I feel that way. I think it's really well done. And as we continue now, you'll notice that the normal mode, it's easier, but also just because I was a little more in practice, the normal mode replay, you'll see I do very well in the early stages, like extremely well. I full chain about all of them, I think. Well, I full chain a lot of it. I can't remember how far I go. And you'll notice on my PC replay, which is the highest score in hard mode, and a score that I've grinded for months. It's not like this is just some shitty score I put up or whatever. It's one that I've been trying to get for months. You notice that my early stages are not good. They are definitely not good. I'm dropping chains. I think I'm getting hit in sections where I don't need to get hit. It's not horrible, because I wouldn't be able to get the score I did if I was playing horrible. But it's not good. I could definitely optimize the early game of the hard mode score, but there's an interesting reason why I'm not sure if that's worthwhile or not, which I'll get to a little further, not yet. So I want to talk about the chaining system in Dan 3. The thing about chaining in this game is that, I mean, the basics are you grind stuff and you chain it, right? And then you kill stuff. And you get the little spirits and they keep your chain going. Yeah, I don't want to talk about the basics. I want to talk about the overall feel of the chaining system. It is probably one of my favorite chaining systems ever. I enjoy it a lot. It's definitely not as strict as something like Donanpachi or even DOJ. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun, and you do have to be mindful of it at all times. It's that perfect sweet spot of being strict enough where you can't just do whatever, but lenient enough where you can be creative with your chainings. Like, you don't have to write them down on a piece of paper and do them the exact same way every time, like in DDP and stuff. You can be more creative with where you chain, what you chain. You can graze stuff, you can cancel the bullets. I feel like Spirit mode, even though it's not intended to be the true mode of the game, I don't think, I feel like it is its best mode. Like, playing true mode, or Spirit mode true and stuff, I think is more fun than playing Graze mode. I think the Spirit mode is what makes the game fun and interesting. Graze mode's cool too, and I'll have to do a follow-up when I'm doing the Graze mode scores. I do think it's a cool mode, but I think the Spirit mode is what makes the game really fun and interesting for both like new players and for experienced players. Here we go, boss 3. You'll see I'm still keeping my chain. So let's talk about some of the small things I was talking about earlier, where small improvements that should be made. The first one is that I feel like, okay, I can't 100% confirm this because it's really hard to, but I'm fairly certain there is a glitch where if you're lasering as the boss spawns, it will not refill your meter. So what happens is, whenever a boss spawns, your meter refills, so you can, keep your chain going. Otherwise, that'd be ridiculous. You drop your chain. However, so if there's been times, and I don't know if it happens during this run or not, I don't think so, but there have been times where if you sit there holding laser, you're just holding laser, and the boss spawns, I feel like there's a glitch where sometimes it will not refill your meter. It won't. Maybe it has to do with its thinking you're hitting the boss or something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it won't refill your meter, and then you drop your chain, and that's a big deal. So whenever I play, I always stop lasering and just hold still till the boss spawns, basically, so I don't drop my meter. And since doing that, it doesn't really happen to me. So there's a way around it. You just don't laser, but there have been times where I've lost decent scores to that glitch. Like I said, it's hard to confirm. I don't think it's in my head though, because it's happened to me frequently enough that I think it's a real thing. So this pattern is really trivial on normal and even in hard mode. But on true mode, this pattern is awful because those, you see those walls or whatever you call them, the bullet walls, they overlap with each other. And so you have to move up and down with them and weave in between them, and then there's bullets coming in at you. It's definitely a much more challenging pattern. It makes me wonder what difficulty the game was designed at initially. My guess would be either normal or hard mode. Probably hard mode, I think, is the default, like what he used in development, like the base difficulty, and then he tuned it back for normal and easy and then turned it up for true. That's what I think anyway. I have no solid information confirming or denying that. I just, based on my experience with the game, that's what I think anyway. Yeah, those gems, just a fun fact, if you hold laser for a second, they will fly to you. So you don't have to, you can make, that's an SDOJ thing, you can do that in SDOJ as well. You can make the stars fly to you by doing that. It's like a little nuance, but man, it makes a big ass difference, especially because what you can do is between certain transitions where you need to keep your chain going but there's not enemies around, you can delay sucking in those gems. So like you can just wait right there. See, I delayed them. That way I don't drop my chain, because if you suck them up right away, you know, you might drop your chain. This boss is filthy in hard mode because of this shotgun attack. So I found that I generally try to just line up with his legs there, and you usually will get it. But yeah, it's still a really fast, unusually fast attack compared to the rest of the game. So here we go. This is the money dragons. That's what I call them, because those dragons are worth so many gems, and so many of your points come from these dragons. And so from here on, stage 3 makes up a good chunk of your scoring, but it is possible, as you'll see in my hard mode replay, which I mess up. I drop the chains somewhere, or I get hit. I can't remember what happens, but I definitely don't full chain this stage like I would like to. So here we are entering the more tricky aspects of the stage, where this is a part of the stage that I don't necessarily like. Not this part, but the top part just before this. Because there are times where I feel like I can just randomly drop my chain. Even in this section too, that's a tricky thing about this game, is that when you start to route really well, oh man, I just ran into something. That can happen too. Sometimes that's just a part of shmups though, that there's so much going on screen, sometimes you don't notice stuff and you just fly into it. That's just part of a genre. I think the stages, the interesting thing about the stages is when you first play the game, they kind of blend together visually, but their layout and stuff is so different and so distinct that once you start to get to know the game better, they definitely have their own personalities, the stages. So this section is absolutely murder on true mode, because the walls here are much closer together, and you have to still navigate these faster bullet patterns. It's a very difficult pattern in true mode. It's fairly difficult in hard as well, but true is pretty crazy. So what's interesting about chaining in this game compared to cave games, I don't know about Toho, I'm not a Toho expert, but compared to cave games is that you can continue your chains during the boss fight. So not only are you chaining throughout the stage, you're also chaining throughout the boss fight. And so this is where this game's scoring system gets interesting, is because it is brutal sometimes, where if you manage to keep your chain going through the boss fight of the later stages, the amount of points ramps up so high that it kind of makes it unforgiving, to where Like let's say you almost full chain the entire game. Really, you generally play really well and only drop a few full chains, but you drop them at one point or another point, and that will you'll cut your score in half. So the game scoring system is surprisingly brutal. It is one of the more brutal scoring systems because of how powerful the chains can get and how high they can get. It makes it so if you want a really good score, you basically have to full chain the later stages. So right there, that was an instance of the switch slowing down. And before I overclocked it, that section there really slows down. Which has its, from a gameplay perspective, sometimes it can help you, right? Because it makes stuff slower and easier to dodge. But there, it kind of messed me up because it sped up. And so I just flew straight into if you're wondering why did I just fly into that laser, it's because the slowdown suddenly ended, and so I flew forward faster than I expected and just hit the laser. So here we go, stage 4. This is, or is it stage 5? This is stage 4, and this is one of the 2 stages where you absolutely must full chain. This is where a lot of your score comes from. Or is this stage 5? Oh, maybe this is stage 5. Yeah. Okay, this is stage 5. This is the money-making stage where it all comes together. And you'll see now in my hard mode replay, just watch. Because you're wondering where did all my score come from? Because so far my hard mode score looks kind of meh. Just watch stage 5 and see what happens when you really maximize the stage. So this section here, when I first played the game, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was pretty badly designed because I didn't quite get how it worked. But once I understood, see, I dropped my chain. That's just a risk of medium mode because your grazing area is smaller and there are less bullets. Like I said, you can just drop your chain sometimes. You don't have to get hit, even if you're like en route. If the bullets are just not quite there in time, you die. Or you don't die, but you drop your chain, which is the same thing as dying. There is no end game bonus for your ships and stuff, or bombs. There is a maximum bomb bonus, which I think I got in my normal mode run here, where, yeah, I think it's beat the first 3 stages without getting hit, you gain an extra bomb, and then your bomb is already full, so you gain a bunch of extra points and stuff. I wish there was more information about how the gem calculation works, how the max bonus calculation works. I really, really wish there was more information on how this scoring system works. Because the funny thing is the year is 2019, right? And we're just used to, as gamers, there always being information on games, especially newer ones, like, oh, I can just look it up. Well, guess what? You can't just look up Dan3's scoring information because there is no such guide. I feel like if anyone would create it, it's me at this point. I mean, the dev could, and I'd be a happy boy if he did, because sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on. Because there are definitely been moments where I've been doing something in a run, and I feel like just either the way the gems are calculated or the way I got the gems, I'll get surprisingly high scores, and then there's other times where I'll get surprisingly low scores compared to what I was expecting. And I think it has to do with the gems. So let's turn your attention to the PC replay now, because I need to talk about what I was alluding to before, which is rank. So yes, there is definitely rank in this game, and the interesting thing about rank is that it not only increases the bullet speed and the amount of bullets, it will literally change the patterns and what they do and what they look like. It will change the game significantly. Rank is not trivial. It makes the game quite a bit harder. It essentially, but not quite, but it basically boosts the difficulty by 1 base difficulty level. So let's say you get your rank nice and high in normal mode, then it starts to play like the base difficulty of hard mode. But it's not exactly the same. And this is an issue because the game does not have any rank select in its training stage select options. There is no rank control. So what does that mean? That means, like I mentioned, in these later stages, almost all your scoring comes from being able to full chain these later stages. The amount of score that comes from that is basically more than half. It's the majority of your score comes from these last two stages. However, the only way to practice them at full rank is to do it in a full run. Because if you try and do it in stage select mode, you're going to get the easier non-ranked up version. And then, yeah, it's going to be completely different, and you're going to make a slight change. There's patterns are going to be slightly different or quite a bit different, and you're not going to get the practice you need. So that is a big criticism I have of the game, is that there needs to be some kind of rank select added to the training mode, because otherwise it is impossible to practice the later stages of the higher difficulties like true mode or even hard mode when it comes to chaining and scoring, because you have to do it in a full run, and there's not even that option that like SDOJ and other cave games or even Zero Ranger have, where yeah, there's no rank select or training mode, but you can just restart the stage. There is no stage restart in Dan 3 either. So if he doesn't want to add the rank selection in the stage select mode, he should add just a quick restart where it'll restart the stage over. Yeah, this is one of the hardest patterns in the game, the pinwheels of death. That's what I call them. I've heard that this is in other Toho games, so this might be pretty heavily inspired by some Toho patterns. At least that's what I've heard. But I think it's implemented well. And I mentioned this before, and other people have mentioned this before, so I don't need to hammer it home, but yeah, what makes Dan 3 really appealing to me is the cross between the styles of Toho and Cave. I think it does it really well, and it makes the game unique. I feel like the closest experience I've had to playing Dan 3 is playing SDOJ. SDOJ is obviously crazy hard, but the way it's designed is pretty similar. And yeah, Dan 3 is one of my favorite shmups. The way it's designed, the way it works, the attention to detail is really phenomenal. It's hard to emphasize. This is fun. Look at my normal mode, switch replay. I'm milking this pattern. Something I dare not do in true mode or in hard mode, but in normal mode it's totally possible, and you have no idea how many, because you can grind up against that wall there. Oh, look at how many more points. That's the main reason why I kept this replay, because even though it wasn't super good, I feel like my last boss fight here is absolutely phenomenal, even in normal mode. And I thought it was fun to show off the milk that you can do on that spinning eye thing. Yeah, this last pattern here is surprisingly easy on the right side, and then tricky as hell on the left side. And then here we come into the final pattern of the game here. Yeah, even on normal mode, you see it's pretty tricky. The difference is as you can see in the hard mode replay, the walls get really tight and they move even faster. But once you kind of get a feel for it, it's not too bad on normal mode. And I was happy to end with the score I did, mostly because of my performance on the last boss, and because I full chained him, basically. So I got hit during the first pattern, but it really didn't matter. And I like the ending here where you get this cloudy title screen. I really like that. I like it a lot more than the default title screen. And another thing I wish you would add is just the ability to keep that. You know, if you get a 1-all or whatever, or if you get some kind of condition, maybe it's still in the game. I haven't unlocked everything, but yeah, to be able to keep that would be really cool. So I guess my final thoughts, the positives of Dan 3, I think it's really well designed bullet hell shmup. The grazing system is really fun, and I think it can help people learn the genre a lot and improve a lot. I think it's a really good introductory game to the genre because you have the rock solid level design, the relative accessibility, the variety of modes. So if spirit mode normal's too hard, which I don't think should be too bad, but let's say it is, the easy mode's still there. And then I think the way the grazing system works is actually really beneficial for new players because it teaches you a lot about the fundamentals of controlling your ship and being able to look on the screen and yet precisely control your ship. I think it just really helps you build up your foundation skills a lot more than some other shmups. So I think if you're kind of new to the bullet hell genre and you're looking for a good introductory one, I think Dan 3 is a great place to start. Go ahead and start playing it. Don't just play it for survival. Try and play it for score and try and graze and chain because it's still accessible enough to do that, even for newer players. Some things I think should be improved on if he ever does do another update, or since he put it on the physical cartridge, I kind of wonder if that's going to happen. But if he does, just some suggestions, definitely do something about the rank control. Either add rank to the stage select or have at the very least there be a restart thing in the runs. So you could, I mean it'd be more work than the training mode thing, but you could still at least practice them by having a stage restart in the runs. Another thing I think could be improved is somehow maybe, if you can, try and do something about the performance on the PC side of things, because it tears through games hard. It tears through my CPU and GPU harder than Dead or Alive 6 or like a lot of new games coming out now. I mean, the game is extremely intensive, and I think maybe it's just that's how it is. That's what I'm saying. I can't say for sure. Maybe just the way the effects work and the graphics work, that's just how it is. But man, if you could optimize that, I think that would go a long way, because for instance, in Shmup Slam this year, I wanted to do a live demonstration of this game, but my computer wasn't as upgraded as it is now. And so I couldn't, because I couldn't actually stream and play the game at the same time without causing massive slowdown in the game and making it basically like I'm cheating. So yeah, try and do something about optimizing it if you can. On the Switch side of things, I mean, there's other things I think would be really nice to have. Online leaderboards would be nice, because I suspect more people have played this game than myself, but I'm the only one motivated enough to put up my scores. But I feel like among the shmup community, the higher scoring players would have done that, so I think it is an issue of just not enough people playing the game as well. But I think still having some kind of in-game leaderboard and stuff would be really cool. I understand if that's not possible. Another thing that I think would be a really nice addition, but again, I don't think it's possible based probably on just how the game was developed. Because, I talked to one of the Zero Ranger devs about this, and he's saying that if you don't create the game with a replay system in mind from the beginning, it's really hard to add one in later, and it's a lot of work. So I don't know if a replay system would be possible. But the trouble is just getting capture from the Switch is a pain in the ass. Like, I loved how Rolling Gunner had a replay system on the Switch version, so I could just play it and then replay it back. I didn't have to worry about playing and capturing at the same time. And again, that would help the PC side of things too, because recording this game on PC is not very easy unless you use an external recorder, which I have done. Like, a lot of my videos are actually done with an external recorder. Unfortunately, the high-scoring hard mode one isn't, because I wasn't expecting to get the high score at that moment. I was just kind of de-rusting and playing a few runs, and I ended up getting that insane last stage there. So, it's a highly recommended game. Dan 3. I wish there was more information on the scoring system. I mean, I know the basics, but there's a lot of stuff, like how the gems are calculated or how the rank works. Um, just those types of things. I really wish there was more information on. And yeah, check it out. Highly recommended. I put a ton of time into this game and I will continue to. I'm really looking forward to the sequel. I really hope he makes one. You know, the danger of indie shmup devs is, you know, they move on. You know, they make their game series and then they move on to greener pastures, probably. But hopefully with the exposure he has gotten, he does feel motivated to continue making the games, because I feel like they're just an upward climb, and I would love to see a sequel to this with just better graphic models and just, you know, just a little better presentation in that sense. But the effects and the coloring, the bold design, I mean, graphically I think it's a very good looking game. It's just the models and stuff look a little bland, and I mentioned that before. Oh, also, you'll notice in this video, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, but I didn't, you won't hear any music because I strongly dislike the soundtrack of this game. I think is definitely its weakest point. The nice thing is you can mute it and just play with the sound effects in your own music, which I always do. So it's not a huge deal because you can mute the soundtrack in the options. But I feel like the soundtrack just does not fit the gameplay. It doesn't work. Overall, I just think the band, I get he brought in that Japanese band, and that was a cool idea. And I do like their style of music, which is funny. I do like prog rock, post rock, progressive rock. Well, I already said that. But, you know, math rock, those types of things. But I just feel like it's too, I don't know what, it's too noisy, or it doesn't quite fit the gameplay very well. So yeah, hopefully the next go around they can improve the soundtrack. That's kind of mean, but I just have to say how it is, because I don't like the soundtrack of this game very much. So yeah, that's, I think, and two, I've heard people kind of use that to dismiss the gameplay, which I don't think is fair. The gameplay in this game is rock solid. The mechanics are really, really well done. The grazing, like collision, works really well, and there's like those nice little touches, like how hard mode has a bigger graze box than medium mode, which makes sense, right? Because it adds that extra challenge to playing for score in medium mode. So like there's a lot of small attention to detail that shows that the developer of this game does know what he's doing, and he is, I think, really, really talented. So I'm hoping for a sequel for sure. I will definitely be really stoked for that. I'm probably one of the biggest fans of this series out there. If you guys listen to my podcast, you know I talk about it in passing pretty often. Sometimes I criticize things about it, but it's only because I like it so much, you know. Like, that's just the relationship shmup players have with the shmups they like. They love them, but they also, you know, criticize them. Even like people with cave games. It's just the nature of the beast. So don't take that as me saying I dislike the game, because I think it's really good and one of my favorites. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you.